in grade school, I was in band and there was 3 chairs. I was the 3rd chair. I did not play a note. Like we had this like understanding, my music teacher and I had this silent understanding where it's like, when you guys go up there and do the concert, Kevin, you just mimic it. You just blow, don't actually make a note and throw off the other band, and like, I'll pass you.
This,
Just don't throw everyone else off.
see, I think now we're getting into like the therapy session of the time where it's like, this is the stem of all your self-doubt and confidence issues.
Fake it till you make it, and you might not never make it.
This is all getting cut. All right, welcome back to The Work, our ongoing series with Chicago filmmakers about different film processes and filmmaking. My name is Curtis Matzke. I'm a writer-director, as well as other things when I have to be. And I'm here with...
Hi, my name is Kevin Pickman. I'm a writer, filmmaker.
So today we're going to talk about confidence and kind of doubts and like maintaining your artistic vision throughout the filmmaking process. I think it's like one of those things that, you know, we all experience at different stages of the process. Like, you know, like I've said to people, like we kind of fluctuate between like extreme overconfidence and crippling self-doubt sometimes when you're like making things. So I wanted to, just like start and like acknowledge some of those kind of like be a little bit more self-aware to like that kind of thing, and ask you what you think you do really well, or what do you like strive to do like as a filmmaker. This can be in like any regard, any aspect of the process. So it's like with writing, like, I mean, for me, like when I think of like stuff that you do, I think like you do like character and setting stuff really well in your writing. I think that's kind of interesting. Is there anything that you are really confident that you do in the process? Stands out.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny that you say that's like, there's like peaks and valleys, right? So it's like 2 like different poles. There's like super confident, and then I suck and everything I do is horrible. And I think that's probably a mindset that a lot of filmmakers, certainly writers, I would imagine, share, where it's like you come up with an idea and you're like, this is the greatest idea of all time. And then you continue to work on it, try to like break it down and see what makes it work. And then that's when, doubt and insecurity start to plague you. And then your great idea all of a sudden is like, this is worthy of the trash bin. What was I thinking? And then it turns around again. And then, you just kind of up and downs repeat until, you end up making it or you don't. So the question was, is there anything that...
Yeah, like what do you think that you do? I mean, I guess we could start either way. Like, I mean, if there's anything that stands out where like, let's start with writing, I guess. So like when you're starting, your writing process, are you ever like, dreading a certain part of the process where you're like, I suck at this part, or like whether it's like outlining or rewriting or things like that, or conversely, do you feel like you're really good at one of those things? Like,
yeah, I guess like one thing that I'm really good at, which kind of sounds, I don't know, like one thing is like I'm really self-delusional, and I think like self-delusion can be kind of healthy, at least for writing, because it's like, I mean, it's so hard. Like the whole entire film production process is so hard to take something from just an idea to write a feature screenplay. Then, after that, we see everything through ourselves for the most part, from producing to directing, and trying to like take something from the kernel of idea to a finished product, and it's edited and it's ready to go. I mean, that's impossible. Like it's so hard. So I think like self-delusion can go a long ways with that. Cause like, if you weren't delusional about it, you would just stop and be like,
that is a good point.
I'm never going to come up with the money to do this. Like, how am I going to cast this? How am I going to do, like, you'd be plagued with so many insecurities. And like, I mean, realistically, it's kind of impossible to get everything aligned and gel, and you know what I mean? Like,
especially considering like, yeah, like you said, it takes so long. If you think about how long this is ultimately going to take from when you like write the first line in a script to like when an audience is going to see it, like no wonder you would like lose all confidence or question your life decisions
Right. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
from the get-go, because you have to be a little insane to like even like try.
I know that's a weird thing with the process. Like I'm always envious of people that like have a well nailed out process. Like this is what I do every time. Like, and
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know. Like I feel like the process always changed from one idea to the next, and like something that had worked for me in the past doesn't work for me like right now. So it's like I feel like my process is always changing. Like
Yeah.
you feel like you have a set process, like you have like this is how I started, this is how I get the ball rolling, or is it always changing?
I mean, for me, it's definitely like very similarly changing, or like I'm discovering like new software things that I want to,
Yeah.
try and see to if we can like organize, those beats ahead of time. Because I mean, I think you're always striving after a thing where like, oh, there's got to be a better, more succinct way to do this. But I think ultimately the answer is that there actually isn't.
Right.
there's different ways to do it, but it's still annoying each time. I talked to Bradley in one of these discussions about forming ideas and like doing things like outlining in Google Docs versus, like the final draft beat board and stuff like that. And,
Sure.
whatever works best. So I guess but speaking to like confidence and doubt things, that is one of those things where I'm always unsure of when I initially start, like, what is the best way to, lay this out on the page and just get the map organized, in my brain. Um, but it's definitely like hard to figure out. But I think ultimately, like you kind of hinted at, you kind of have to trust the process. If you just like, no matter what it is, just plow through,
Right.
eventually it will reveal itself, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of saying it. Like so, because like with me, when I have an idea, and like how excited I can get with like an idea, and I'm always seeing shiny objects. I'm like, oh, maybe I should pursue this idea instead of this thing I'm working on. But like when you have an idea and it really excites you, and you really haven't done the work, you really haven't unpacked it yet, but you're like, let's try to develop this. Do you to help you like with your confidence as far as like before you sit down in Final Draft or whatever screenwriting program that you use? Do you try to write a treatment, or do you try to hit like certain beats to give yourself like flagpoles in order to give yourself the confidence, so that way you're not discouraged while you're writing actual pages?
Kind of. I mean, this one I'm working on now, like I did a treatment in prose that's really just kind of like the
Mhm.
first act of the movie. I always like find it easier to like do the first act because it's like, oh, it's
So much
it's
fun. Yeah.
easy. Yeah, exactly. It's fun. I mean, then the middle act is terrible, and then you think of like a really cool ending, but then it's just figuring out how to get to A to B. Um, but yeah, I think the treatment written in prose, written in this kind of like fun way of writing. A screenplay isn't really like the most fun way to write something because you want to avoid certain kind of action points and descriptions, but and you have to be mechanical in the blueprint. But writing in prose can actually help me get a little bit more excited. And I think we can talk later about like how you overcome that kind of same thing like in post-production. I talked a little bit recently with Jim about this, Jim Vandiola, about doing things like sizzle reels and lookbooks that keep you excited and confident that there's something there. I mean, how do you like instill confidence in like your collaborators and maybe crew like working on set or working on production? Because that's another thing that's kind of uh, obviously super tricky depending on the scale of the project, the experience level of people involved, but it speaks to a lot of the same things where like you have to maintain your artistic vision and convince other people that this is the way it should be done for the story. But when you have all these people asking you questions, it can be really tricky. Do you have any kind of like tricks or things that you do to keep a cohesive set?
Well, I think like one thing. Sorry, the original question was like, how do you instill confidence in your collaborators?
Yeah, and like collaborators, crew, or yourself. Even like, are there like, I mean, hell, do you like meditate before set, before shooting on a day or something? Do you drink heavily or
Um, I
whatever
think like
works?
I think it's just that, right? It's like the actual um, fact, like it's the actual act of like collaboration. So it's like for me, like when I'm collaborating with someone, and like it depends based on that position. But like with the cinematographers, say like I want them to feel ownership in it. Like I want them to like I want to involve them super early on, and I want them to feel like they can take it and like make it theirs as well. And like a lot of times like that collaboration begins before you get on set, obviously, so like you guys both have a cohesive idea of what you're trying to achieve. um, so like yeah, just trying to work with people early on in the process and trying to see their point of view, or what things that how they're seeing it, what they could add, and then try to arrive at somewhere, um, try to arrive somewhere before you get on set. I feel like
Hmm.
is always beneficial. I mean, especially with actors, it goes the same thing. The same thing goes for them as well, where it's like you want to have countless conversations with them, like maybe not rehearse everything to death, but like see how they're like, does this make sense? Would your character do this?
Right.
Because there's like that's one thing I've always kind of struggled with. I feel like early on when I started doing stuff, I was afraid of it. I was afraid of the screenplay turning into something else. Um,
Hmm.
and as the older I get, I feel like that's inevitable. Like the screenplay is just a blueprint. It's not going to be the thing that's in your head. Like that's impossible. You cannot share something that's like that's inside your own brain, and it's all right that it changes, and like embrace that. So like embrace the collaboration, see how they take it. Like it's going to be so much better. Like if you trust in that, it's going to be so much better. And like that's why it's fun, right?
Right.
Like that's
Yeah.
like working with other people. But like what you
Yeah.
said, like you still have to have your vision, right? So I feel like as long as you're upfront and you start collaboration very early on, everyone's going to be on the same page.
Right.
When it's time to.
Yeah. I agree with all that. It's definitely about like just like finding the core of the story and the emotional arc. And like I think actors talk a lot about like finding, I've said this before, but like about finding truth in their characters. I think more directors and filmmakers need to like frame it in that same way as like what is the thing that's actually important. And I think in order to like do this whole thing, you have to be open to the evolution and know that like you said, the script is never going to be the same as production. Production's never going to be the same as the edit. And then ultimately how people view the thing at the end is completely out of your hands. Like, I mean, they might just be having a bad day and then hate your movie, but
Exactly.
you have to be like open to that and be interested in that throughout the entire
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to embrace it because, like, I mean,
Otherwise you
think about
direct
why you're
the thing.
doing it. Yeah, like why are you doing it to begin with? Like you're not making a movie for yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So it's kind of absurd not to like collaborate with other people and let it become a thing that everyone can communicate through, and everyone can see, like everyone can take away something from it or put something into it. Like
Yeah. So you can't be super overly protective or sensitive about certain aspects, but like it's still difficult to sometimes again communicate that with different collaborators. Like say you're working with a DP and they have a different kind of experience level working on like commercial things or things like with a bigger crew, and you're out your indie movie that has like three other people. It's like how do you instill confidence on them, you know and it seems like you say, it's like involving them early on, getting everyone on the same page,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
explaining the core
I
of the
mean,
project.
yeah, I mean, it's like specifically like for DP, like maybe, I mean, if you don't storyboard everything, like at least go over and do overheads. Like make sure that everyone is on the same page, because like if you guys, if there is a difference of opinion on how to do something, you obviously don't want that conflict to arise on set, because that's going to be disastrous. Like
You don't have time.
have that argument or that conversation while you're doing the pre-production.
Yeah.
Like,
And then in front of actors, and then they lose confidence and everything.
exactly.
Everything gets worse and it all falls apart.
I feel like I'm most confident on set. I think that's because it's like, if you've done your homework, you've created this battle plan and you try to stick to it, and obviously you're never going to stick to it, but at least you have a plan, right? You feel confident that you've planned for it. You know what you know what needs to happen. It's just about trying to make your day each day. But like, I think the real reason I feel most confident on set is because I'm so exhausted that I don't have any brain power to worry or let doubt creep up into my soul, because it's like there's just no time for it. Like you're exhausted. Like there's so much you're doing on an independent set. Like there's absolutely no time to like exercise any type of insecurity, because like there's just
Interesting. I mean, like, I can see that being like interpreted like different ways, because like it's funny how like there are some people who just love production so much, who are just like they don't really even care about the rest of the thing. They just live for that intense, the schedule, the hours and the camaraderie and all this stuff. For me, I don't know if I'd say that's when I'm most confident, but I agree with everything what you said though. Like that's the weird thing. Like how do you describe this thing? You're just kind of forced to do production. I view production as a means to an end. Like, and in an ideal world, you are just like putting the puzzle pieces, down.
mm-hmm.
And but it is also super stressful, and you're dealing with days and have to cut pages and make compromises and do all these other things.
I do have a question for you, and I don't know if it really relates to the theme here, but I'm interested. So like when you have these various stages, like, I mean, specifically for people that start with the idea and they're the writer, and then they're also directing and also cutting it at the end of the day. Like, I'm always curious, because there'll be a part where, let's say I finish a first draft or even the final draft, right, of a screenplay, and it's before I start working with actors. It's before I've done any casting, and like I can see the characters, I can hear like the cadence of the dialogue in my head, and then casting happens, and then rehearsals happen, and then like they quickly transform, and not in a bad way. It's just like all of a sudden it's like, oh, I totally forgot what the original characters kind of sounded like in my head. And then when you have picture lock, and then trying to like remember, like dusting off the screenplay and looking at it, compared to the final, is it always like, can you even go back to that spot where you were when you first started writing those pages? Because I can't. To me, it's like once it's done, it's like it just kind of erases any type of memory I had of what it was before it ever was the final piece.
Yeah, I think I feel kind of similarly. I try to go back and like read the original script before like after production, before really digging into editing, to see again what that kind of core thing that I was after originally is. But like we talked about, it is an evolution, and you have to treat each phase of production like its own thing, so it kind of builds on top of itself. So it's not going to be like that original idea. But I mean, I do think that, like there's value in going back and being aware of that evolution, right? And like seeing, like, because I have noticed things, like just small things that I forgot about in production, or even that we got, or that was like its own significant line in the script that I was like, oh, I want to emphasize. It's not like a necessarily a character thing, but it's maybe just like an insert or something like that. But it does frame the narrative in a different way. So I think it is probably like valuable to kind of, like I said, be aware of the evolution as it goes along.
I mean, I feel like, I mean, in general with anything, the more you do something, the better you get at it.
Sure.
So like for me, I can see like early on, I would think, okay, I have my final draft of the screenplay. I've gutted it, and there's not one piece of dialogue I could lose. There's not one set piece that I could lose. Everything has to be shot. And then like you shoot it, and then you get into the cutting room, and you're like, yeah, that can go. That can go.
Yeah.
That can go. Do you feel like the more that you do this process from finish to, or from start to finish, do you feel like your writing gets better, or are you able to like really focus or really see it's like, yeah, we don't need this like on paper, or are you still cutting out things that you never thought you could cut out on paper but are cutting out on film?
That's an interesting question because yeah, it is weird being someone who writes and directs and edits, and yeah, going through the process of thinking, reworking during each phase, like what do I actually need? Because the editor in me wants as many options as possible, and then the like right. But like, I mean, I think that as a writer though, so to answer your question, I have kind of, I think, gotten better, particularly in my feature writing, to be more economical on the page is the way I describe it, where like I want the scripts now to like read way more smooth than the way I was initially writing. Like I would write much longer action blocks and like kind of dense dialogue. Now I just want to get in and out, and like, or if it's a dialogue thing, if the tail end of the dialogue is like, I usually end up cutting like the first couple of lines, or first beginning lines of a scene, because I'm like, it's like, okay, see you later, as they walk out the door. It's like, why just cut to the next scene? Like, I know I'm not going to use that. So, and I think that, yeah, being an editor has helped with that kind of thing, and
so like being an editor,
pacing.
So being an editor has influenced you as a writer, like?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think so. I
never really think about it quite so much.
It's something I've been thinking of lately, where I'll write dialogue and I'll go back through and I'm like, I'm going to cut this. Like, I'm going to cut this. It's not going to work on film. Like, I know I'm going to cut this. Well, so why even keep it in there?
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about this before, is like sometimes we keep it in the screenplay, I feel like, because we feel like the reader needs it. It's weird to write something for a reader, but then cut something for a viewer. They're so opposite. From one another. Something so.
And that's why I was trying to speak to like how like adding economy in your writing, and like when I write scripts, I always want it to be like, I want you to picture the movie. I want you to sit down. I mean, ideally, you should read it in one setting. I want it to play out as if you're watching the movie. Right. But yeah, I think that there are some times where you're like, do I need to over explain this in certain aspects? But like, I think ultimately you have to trust your audience to not be, that stupid. So like they'll figure it out. And I think when you're presented something visually too, it is a very different experience than reading it, because when you're reading, you're filling in the gaps in your brain and how you would envision this thing. Like on screen, it's like, this is it. So, I think being aware of that does help. But conversely, you do want to have options, and you do want to have like, the head and tail of certain aspects to consolidate too, because sometimes I think I've been on sets where the director has and writer has like trimmed things down too much, and then they're like, the film ends up too short or not enough explanation or cohesive substance to it. So I think as time goes on, we all just get better at like going back and forth between this. how do you deal with notes and feedback then confidently? And that, I mean, this is a whole nother kind of process that, like, part of the process that Bradley and Robert talked about, failures and dealing with, things like rejection, but more in keeping with like the actual still making the thing. Yeah. Do you have like a typical like way you deal with notes? Like, do you do rough cut screens with people? At what point do you share with people? And then how do you like,
From an editor standpoint?
yeah, yeah, I guess.
Um, yeah. Let's see.
And I guess like along the same lines, what do you feel like you need from crew, friends, family, other outside sources to like to boost that kind of confidence back up or whatever?
Yeah, I think for like as an editor, as far as like feedback and notes, I really, I really love the feedback and note part of the whole thing. I mean, I think it's important. Once again, it's like be aware of who you're sending this to, like especially at what stage it's in. You want to protect it, but at the same time, you don't want only yes people saying, "Oh, this is fantastic," but then you also don't want people just weighing in just for the sake of like, well, they're asking me to say something, so I'll start. I don't
Yeah,
really, like, you know what I mean?
like
Um,
again, like we
that's
talked
why,
about the note behind the note.
yeah, exactly. And it's like for me, it's like I really like, so the process that I would like to continue on to the next thing is like I want to get, so like when I sit down and I cut it together, I'll try to do just a rough assembly, and
Hmm.
at that point I'm asking my wife, like asking for notes. What do you think? This take, that take. What do you think of the first 5 minutes? Can I trim it? Da da da. And so I'll have countless conversations with her, and then what I want to do is I want to hire another editor to come in and take my assembly cut, and he or she can use the assembly cut and trim down, or they can take raw footage, new clips, whatever they feel that's going to make the story work. And I'm always interested in like what their version of it is, or
Sure.
if it's making sense to them, because like because you're so wrapped up in it. Like there's times where you're guessing, where it's like, well, I don't know, and you're putting too much exposition because you're not confident in the fact that the viewer is going to get it, and then like someone can come in and be like, we get it. You need 1 minute of this exposition, not 5 minutes. Like and cut
Just
all
bring
of
about
that.
this whole other thing, you know,
Right.
like
And then there's times where it's the other way around. It's like you think an idea is so clear because you've lived with it for so long, but you haven't successfully set it up yet. So like those types of people can come in and like tell you like, are you communicating effectively? So like to me, I love getting notes, and I love like
hmm,
there's a part of me too where it's like notes are really hard because it's like you're saying a note behind the note is it like what do they mean this part's not working? It could mean something 5 minutes earlier, 10 minutes earlier, that's why it's not working. It could be something completely different. So that's why I like working with like an editor that's actually going to come in and start cutting, that
yeah.
has that has like, and specifically someone that is coming at it from a story sense.
Hmm.
Um, I'm always like the
Right.
last editor that I work with, he's also a writer. So it's perfect. Like he
Yeah,
knows exactly, the beats I'm trying to hit. He knows how to tell a story. He knows structure. So he's
right.
coming at the editing the same way that I was trying to do in on page. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that really does, yeah, make a difference. Like we were talking about that, writing and editing being kind of these two parts of the process that work in tandem. And then same, I mean, a lot of what you just said about editing also applies to writing and getting, feedback from people. I think,
because it does give you confidence, right?
yeah, exactly. Like it's one of those things where like, I mean, as someone who does like freelance video work, I obviously have to deal with like notes from clients and crap like that all the time, where it's like, obviously the more specific the note, the better. And at some points, when I see like a long list of like bullet points, at first I'm like, oh God, I have to do so much work. But then once I actually start doing it, I'm like, oh, that was easy. Oh, that was easy. That's a quick fix. Like you get kind of better at, working through it too.
Like you have to be patient with it as well. Like sometimes I'm envious of like other art forms where someone can do something by themselves and like get something within a week, whether it's like a song or something. And like this is such a long, arduous process that it's like there's so much time that you can psych yourself out from doing it. So I think, yeah, like self-delusion can be healthy and like in a certain aspect. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the other thing I think I do well, or I don't know if well is the right word, but something that I like really enjoy and I feel like I get a lot of answers from is constantly asking questions.
Mm.
So like, and this is specifically to the writing process, is I will come up with an idea and my brother is kind of like my go-to person, like for like a jumping off point where it's like, I'll come up with this idea and like, what do you think? And either, keep trying or, oh yeah, that's cool. You should keep exploring it. And then like, if it's something he likes, then it starts to snowball. And then it's like, well, I start asking questions like, well, what do you think this character would do? What are they feeling at this point? Or like even broader brushstrokes, like thematically, what do you think this is? And it's like, it's not only, it's like not even that I don't know 100%, but I'm curious of like how another point of view is seeing it. So I feel like asking questions, like having like peers to bounce questions off of is like super important. And I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, you do that well. It's weird saying this kind of stuff too. It'd be like, I'm really good at this thing is the weird, but like also like I said, like we don't like have those conversations very often. But I think, yeah, like talking it out with other people early on to see if there's like viability. I mean, that can also be like on like the flip side of it, that can sometimes hurt if you think you have a really good idea and then you immediately get shot down by it from someone and then you
Yeah,
do lose confidence.
that always hurts. Yeah.
So it's always kind of like a question of,
Yeah, it's dangerous. That's why I think it's like it's important that it's important that you are picking the right people to bounce those ideas off of. Because like if it's someone like, I mean, you and I bounce ideas off of each other quite a bit, and like we both know what it's like on the other side. So it's like just because like if you told me an idea and like I'm not seeing it right off the bat, or I'm not excited by it as you are, doesn't mean that there's not something there. So it's like trying to ask that other person, okay, what's interests you about this? Like as long as you have those people around you that aren't going to shoot it down without like really trying to take the time to see why you find it so interesting. But yeah, I wouldn't like, just go up to a random group and be like, hey, I got this really good idea for this movie. What do you think? Without it being really a workshop, because they're going to be like, yeah, because a lot
yeah,
of times it can start with something so simple and so like, it could just be like, yeah, like a scene or something. You're not even quite sure what it is. And
right.
like, if someone doesn't understand the process of like trying to build off that one thing, then
Yeah, unless you're like super confident in like in your kind of meta, commentary and analysis of like this person's things. Like if you know that this is a person, say they're not involved in film or whatever, that you're showing to as like a random audience, member. Like like it's sometimes beneficial when you are thinking like, oh, why is it that they responded this way? It's the note behind the note kind of thing.
right, yeah.
Which, even if they are like, I don't like this, that could be like awesome if you're like, going, say it's like a horror movie and they're like, I hate this. And you're like, cool, you know,
Right.
but yeah, it's definitely, difficult to find the exact kind of balance and people you trust.
Like I said, like you've got to have some sort of intent of why you're doing it, and it should probably be more than just because it's going to be fun or it's going to be entertaining or it's going to be like a good use of my time. Like it's going to excite me. Like I think a project always needs something more than that. You really have to like
I mean,
find that little chunk that speaks to you, like how you can make it your own. But
I think you're talking about like finding your own voice is essentially what you're saying. Is like if you try and completely copy someone else, you're just going to be a derivative of a derivative.
right,
And we've seen those kinds of movies before, particularly on like big budget movies that are like knockoffs of other, popular things. But like if you
yeah,
can, not to say that you can't use those things as influences, of course, but
yeah,
you have to trust whatever your kind of point of view is in making it
right,
unique. Because that's another thing that I've kind of tried to get better at in like, even if I did try and like copy to a certain degree, it is always going to be different. And I've like written stuff that has, been similar in subject or tone to other movies. Of course, like we've always had that kind of thing that there's the crippling, crushing doubt and and problems when you find out that you wrote something that's like totally similar to this other idea that's coming out, next week. But if you plow through and, embrace that your experience, your life experience, your filmmaking experience, everything has, put you on a different path, where even if you tried to make it like this thing, it still would be very different. I think embracing that can actually lead to a lot of confidence and, keep you plugging forward. We're talking a lot about like the general kind of process going about writing. Is there anything specifically in like writing that you feel like you're really good at? Like, is it like dialogue or action or just like maybe pacing of scenes or something like that? Because like, and if so, how do you feel like you like got those skills to hone in on that? Because like I've gotten that note from other people where like sometimes people think my dialogue is really good, which I think is actually my like weakest part. I consider myself more of a visual writer and have write action better, but I've gotten good notes on other aspects. So that's another source of like, questioning, like, I don't even know, like, are you even self-aware of what you're good at?
Yeah, I don't like. I think the only thing, I mean, to be honest, I'm probably not aware of what I'm really good at, other than um, being stubborn and like having to do it almost. Um, but I feel like one thing that just like, I mean, at least that excites me is like coming up with an idea that hopefully really communicates or really connects with someone else. So like, I'm always interested in um, like sincerity through silliness almost.
Interesting.
So that's if I had like a thing, I feel like that would be it. Like trying to connect in a sincere way, but not be heavy-handed with it, and try to mask it in something that's absurd or a little silly or humorous.
Gotcha.
Because I feel like I feel like when it's done well, it's like it's a total gut punch because you're not expecting it. Like your guard's down. You don't feel like you're being like preached to or have a theme shoved down your throat. But like when it's done well, it's like, oh wow, how did you take something so silly and then I'm like, I have tears streaming down my eyes at the end. Like for me, it's like just thinking off the top of my head, but like Swiss Army Man, like love it or hate it. I mean, to me, it was super emotional, especially from a place where they started, like a fart joke. And it's like,
exactly. Yeah, I think that's definitely like a hard thing to kind of, grasp onto. I mean, with all these things, it's always like you want it to be a cohesive thing. So you don't necessarily want someone to say like, oh, your dialogue's really good. But then, because like then my source of doubt is like, that means my action is terrible, So like you want everything to cohesively work together. And obviously the emotional core and thematic stuff is probably the most valuable thing. So if that's resonating, um, you know, that's more important, I guess, right?
Yeah, because it's like I lost my train of thought again. Uh,
I mean, for me,
uh,
like, I mean, I always really like when it's in the can at the end of production, and you're like, you have all the footage, or you got as much footage as you can, and also you're ignorant to the fact that you haven't started editing and you don't know what you
sure. Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have.
You're constantly thinking about that in the back of your head while you're on set. Sure. Um, yeah, because it's
It's always like, I mean, I think for like it's really just those two things working in tandem, right? It's like it's the plowing through puzzle piece aspect, but just having to, I don't know, like, yeah, hopefully there's enough there to get through it. I mean, what back to like editing, I mean, editing is sometimes when I feel the worst. I mean, like when I realize like if there's one shot that we forgot to get, and I'm
sure.
like, the whole movie doesn't work. And then
Yeah.
after a while I have to like realize that, oh, it still works.
Right. Um, yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, because like, well, just back up just to get to that point. So, but it's like, so like when you're on set and like you will be faced with a decision, right? And you need to make it quickly. So it's like there's no time to like agonize. Should I do A or B? You have to make a choice. And it's like it's weird for me to like I'm surprised that I'm answering it this way because like I've always felt like intuition, like and this is like just in generalities, like in life, like I always felt like follow your gut or follow your heart was kind of like I don't understand that. That's weird to me. Like there's times, sure, but
You're a
like
critical thinker and you have to.
yeah, like why? Like I think this is goes back to like trying to plan out everything in the writing process, and even in the pre-production, making sure all my bases are covered. Is like why just follow your first reaction? Because there's times where I've done that and it's been disastrous. So if you have the time to like think laterally, like why not do it? Like yeah, if you have the luxury before you start something, why not think it through? Like, okay, let's see what would happen if I go this way. Okay,
Sure.
let's see what happens if I go route B. Let's see what happens if I go route C. But then on set, like when you're trying to make your day, you have zero time to do that. So like you said, like some days you need to cut a bunch of shots or you need to combine two scenes together. And I think just because you have time is not on your side, it allows you to basically put away any insecurities that are creeping up on you and just like we have to go this route. So like in a weird way, that's one time in my life where I feel like that old adage of like following your gut or intuition actually makes sense to me. And
It's
maybe
kind of,
that's why I feel like
yeah.
I'm most confident in that because like I don't understand it, right? And I don't want to like over intellectualize it or like demystify it or something. It's just like you have to do it. Like that's the weird part.
I
But
think I mean, I think what you're getting at is it's kind of like the same thing with actors, right? It's a similar process where like you over prepare, you get to this point where it's like all in the back of your head, and then it's like an instinctual thing in the moment. Because
right.
like in performance, like you want to
Yeah.
have this character backstory, but you don't really necessarily want to be thinking about that all the time. Or like learning your lines, like you know your
Right.
lines, but you're not thinking about your lines. And it's like same thing with like making a quick decision about like a sudden wardrobe change or location change and being like, what is the core of the story? But it's funny that thinking about our two kind of responses there as far as like on set versus right off after set, like we kind of gave opposite answers, but
It's
it sounds like I suspect that once you're done with set is when that stuff starts creeping back in.
oh yeah.
I
Like
mean, I think that's like,
as
but
soon
then
as you
sometimes
wrap,
it's like it's a weird balance of relief and then understanding that there's a whole new obstacle in
right.
front of you
Yeah.
in the act two of making a film.
Like I still think of still think back about wrapping the last project that I did, and my wife, like this would be like weeks later, she was like, I don't understand. I don't understand why you were so like we had wrapped, everyone's like excited, clapping, and like immediately like my wheels are turning. I'm like, did we get everything? Like I have this internal dialogue, and she's like, you were so despondent, and you should be celebrating, and you couldn't do it. And I was like, yeah, because I was so terrified now. Like I was able to just ride on adrenaline because I had to, and now, the doubt and insecurity have
but the thing is,
thrown back up in full force.
at that moment when you were like, when all that was creeping back up, could you have done anything else? Like that was the thing. As like,
Oh yeah, I mean, how many times are you in the editing room and you're like, why the hell didn't I get coverage? Or like, why did I think this is gonna work? And like,
and I
hate
was
your past self when you were so confident in that decision on set. Now you're able
bastard.
to. Let me ask you another question about confidence, and this kind of relates back to like our unique position being a writer and the director. So like, there's times where we'll rewrite dialogue, even down to a cadence, or like, well, maybe it should be sarcastic, or no, maybe it should be sad, and like you're not quite sure how to write it, which one's the right way. So you eventually settle on a way, on the screenplay, and then when it's time to shoot it and it's time for you to give direction, and you can do a take the way that it's in the screenplay, and then you can do a second take of like, well, let's try that one idea that I had before I definitely until I decided that this is the way it was going to be in the screenplay. Do you find yourself doing that a lot on set, like trying out the alternative ideas that you once had, or do you try to keep it to
like,
just trying to keep it one way, like let's stick to it, this is the way it is?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard because like my last project was was kind of very paint by numbers as far as like there was no dialogue, so it was a little bit easier to follow like the blueprint of it. But in terms of like finding alternate kind of aspect, I always try and get a couple. I tried to
Completely different, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of like, for me, it's more of a relationship with the actor, I think, is how it evolves than my initial writing thing. So, like, I think sometimes whatever the actors take is going to be more interesting. But it is difficult to, because if you do that too much, though,
You kind of lose.
you could have like two completely different movies. I mean, like, so I think that if you do have to get more confident in sticking to one thing overall. Like if you're like, let's do a funny take of every line and then do a dramatic take of every line, and then you're like, what is this movie?
What's the point of?
Yeah, and I think also your actor would kill you.
But if it was like, I'm more specifically thinking of like something that's just like this little nuance, like a small little thing. And like, maybe you don't have like an actual example for this, but like the second part of the question would be like, now that you're the editor and you're presented again with that same dilemma that you had in the writing process, and you don't know what take to use, like how do you
Gotcha.
how do you ultimately decide? Like, how do you become confident with take A is better than take B? Like,
I don't even really know. I don't think there is an answer to that. I mean, I think that, yeah, with things.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, there's times where you're like plagued by it in the editing room, and you have like these two great takes, and they're like just slightly different, but like you're like, which one? It works one way for you one day, and then the second day you're like, actually, I think I'm leaning towards take two instead of take one. I thought I liked take one better.
And it's a question of the, like, it's a kind of a Kuleshov effect kind of thing too. And like you show it to other people,
Yeah.
they won't notice even the difference between the two shots. But you're like, she blinked in that one, and it's like no one cares. This is not.
You see what I did there? What? Yeah, I changed that take. I'm like, no.
So yeah, I mean, for me, I think it like you're right that like one day it could be completely different. Next I I have to kind of like let it go. I have to not obsess
Yeah.
about it and just like move on to the rest, move on to another scene, go back. And then most of the time when I go back, I'll be like, then I'll question like, wait, what was the difference? So I'll get to the point where I'm like, I can't even notice it anymore. So like I'll make a note of it. But I mean, I do like try and get as many options on set though, as far as like those nuancy kind of moments, because I do think in many ways those um, reactionary shots build a scene
Right.
more than anything else. And just like lingering still moments, which are often lost in bad independent films, short
Right.
films. But yeah, like getting to the point where you can just like confidently make the decision is probably like the hardest part. And I will show it to like editor friends first. I'll be like, do you notice? And then I'll show it to like, maybe my brother or a family member and be like, does like as a person who's not involved in film, do you even know what the hell I'm talking about? Like, does this work? But
Because I feel like as an editor, it's either like you're so hard on yourself because like when you're shooting it, you're like, oh, I got to get coverage. I got to do a couple different takes of this. And then as an editor, you can either have two reactions like, oh my God, why do you have 10 takes of something so simple? And then there's other times where it's like, why did you only get one take? Like, what were
right, it is one or the other. You're never satisfied as an editor with what you're getting.
At the end of the day, that's what it's about. You're never satisfied. So have you worked with have you ever like directed and handed it off to an editor?
I have, and then we've kind of it's
Did
like
you like that?
what?
Did you like that? Because I originally would probably like the old me would be like, I can't give it to another editor, but I thoroughly loved like, here it is, like, because like
Yeah,
there gets to a point where you're working with someone and the collaboration starts again and you can feel confident in that collaboration because it's like, oh, this isn't working, but here's my idea to get it work.
yeah.
Fantastic. Or this is working, I'm going to keep it the exact same. And then it's like, yes, all right. I feel confident then in what I've put together here. It's like, cause like, there's like, I'll butcher the story, but there's like, when they were making Jaws, Spielberg and his editor were cutting it like in his pool house or something. And she would make a cut and he would make a cut. And if they made the cut at the exact same time, they knew it was like, this is how it has to go, right? Like, this is when I cut away from the shark. And if I cut away, if they both did the same cutaway, that's like, we don't need to think about it. We're both
Yeah.
confident and this is how it should be. So like, to me, that's like, it's similar. Like it gives you confidence working with someone else. Like,
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I think it also keeps you energized about the project too. If you're like, I mean, I obviously like, I think there are a few people who actually like doing the initial assembly, editing stuff and going through a whole bunch of takes and, syncing sound and doing all that, assistant editor crap. But like when, like it's always very excited to be re-energized about the project, and they come back and like, here's the thing. And it's like, even if it's like way off, I'm like, oh, it's the thing. Like getting to that point is very important because like it can be super daunting just looking at all this, unlogged footage and, sifting through everything initially. I can see the benefit of going both ways though, because like I've done where like I've done the assembly and then I've gone to another editor and then just let them do the kind of more fine cutting stuff, which I think there's benefits to both, but I don't know, like I'd love to get to a point where I have that kind of workflow. I can, be working on multiple things while someone else is, cutting. I want to ask you just kind of as a final thing, do you have any other specific, tricks or things that you do to gain confidence for, not just like specifics in the process, but maybe just like career wise and like plugging, through. I mean, I think one thing I've been doing recently that helped me kind of boost my morale and as I work on multiple projects and stuff like that was, and this is a stupid thing, but it was like updating my resume or updating my website and be like, oh, here are the last, like a lot of good things that I did this past year or whatever. And just like little reminders of things like that.
Sure.
Another thing that I've done too is like, I've been watching like talks like this. And I think that there's a lot of benefit to hearing other people speak the same language as you, even if they're like, I just watched one with like Lulu Wang and, Judd Apatow talking about process. And it was like, oh, like I get what they're saying. Again, when you would talk about no matter what the level, and not to say that, they're not independent filmmakers as well, still different kind of independent filmmaker, but it is ultimately the same kind of nuts and bolts. And I think that kind of thing can definitely help boost your confidence. But is there anything like that you can think of that works for you career-wise?
Yeah, I'm with you as far as like hearing other people talk about the process. Like I love listening to like the DGA podcast, like A24, and hearing other people talk about their experience and their process. I mean, that's always for me, it just excites me. And I'm like, oh man, that's great. I cannot wait to get to that point in the process again. Like if someone's talking about editing and it reminds me, I was like, oh man, that is so great and so true. So I mean, yeah, just listening to other people speak about their filmmaking process is enough to energize you and like to give you some bit of confidence to start over again. As far as like other tricks, I don't know, like I feel like not to be so precious with stuff, and like I've always felt this tremendous pressure to get stuff done, or I'm not doing enough, or uh, I'm not working as quick as other filmmakers. And it's like it's something that I feel like I'm getting better with, just giving myself a break, or like, not giving myself an excuse to be lazy, or like
Yeah.
just giving yourself, like easing up on yourself. And it's like, it's fine. Like you're going to work at your own pace. And to me, it's like, I've gotten to the point where it's like, it's just filmmaking. Like at the end of the day, it's just filmmaking. You're not doing.
You're not curing cancer,
Yeah. Right. It's like, what's the pressure? Like it doesn't like, and like you can exist outside of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Do other things. Like you don't need to have one thing like identify you as a person is kind of silly, right? And that's been something that I've really struggled with, and I feel like in the last 3 years I've been getting better with, especially now that I have a son. It's like in context now, and it's like, oh yeah, this is so. Oh, I'm so worried. I'm such a tortured artist. It's like, get over yourself. Don't be so gross. Like,
yeah.
Like,
now your priority is making sure your son doesn't die.
like it's like that doesn't matter. Like, and it's like I've always felt the pressure is like, well, what if you don't get into this festival, or what if you like, you have all these goals where it's like, one day I want to premiere at South by Southwest, and it's going to happen. And it's like, I'm at the point where it's like, if it does, it does. If it doesn't, who cares? Like like at the end of the day, you still have to do this. Like I still have to do this because I like doing it. It's fun. I enjoy the process. So I think that in the end, like that's going to have to be enough for a person. Like just if you have to do it, then you're just going to do it. It doesn't matter what scale you're going to do it on. If you're successful by a South by Southwest or another prestigious festival, great, fantastic. But like if you don't, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a failure. Like if you still care about telling stories, that should be enough. And like you're going to finish something in whatever time it takes you.
Absolutely. That's a great note to end on.
And I feel like that gives you a little more confidence just to like allow yourself to take that breath.
Absolutely. And I think it ultimately makes you a better filmmaker if you're not, constantly thinking just about film. You're not comparing yourself to other people, and you're finding your own
life.
voice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Connect with others. Yeah. To like.
Yeah. Be a person first.
Exactly. Be a human being. Yeah.
It's hard sometimes.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I think this was a great chat, as always. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.